Hi, guys.
Let us ask our audience for if they have questions, and we'll be happy to take them. Mr. Eggleston.
When we talked about the Arctic and wolves, a named Canadian author, and he came to mind, is he going to be in a future volume? And if you had a chance to meet him?
For who is that?
Mowat.
Well, I haven't, but I write about, I mentioned him in here. The woman, Lois Crisler, who wrote a book on Arctic Wild about wolves, came out a few years before him. His book, Never Cry Wolf, came out, I believe, in '62. He was from Canada, and she came out sooner. So I end this book in 1960,
Right, yeah.
and so he's going to be more profiled in the next volume. This one, I gave it to this Lois and Herb Crisler, not as well known as Farley Mowat, but was before him. And what she did is they lived with wolves and it wouldn't fly in today's biology, because they took a bunch of wolf pups and raised them like dogs. And so the film footage was of these little wolf pups licking them on the face and all of this, funny scenes. However, they tried to let them back into the wild, and they had become so domesticated that they were scratching at their door to come in. And
like the PBS thing, Born Free, that they just had this week.
It's like that. And so in some ways, people criticize Lois Crisler for the way they dealt with this. On the other hand, by having Disney do this documentary, it made a lot of people say, let's save wolves at Yellowstone. Let's save wolves in the Arctic. They add to the mystique of a landscape. But I had no idea, though I started writing this book, how hated wolves are by ranchers. And I mean, you hear about it, you hear about it from Sarah Palin's hatred of wolves. But it's very deep in their psyche that wolves are a rat. In their mind, you're saying save a bunch of rats in your house. They really have that kind of disdain, and it's a frontier disdain of what the damage a wolf pack can do, which doesn't quite make sense in this modern world of ours right now. But they're very stigmatized animals, wolves, and are still probably the most controversial animal. But here in Texas, you're allowed to drive a car. It's the only state if you saw a mountain lion, I only wish I'd be so lucky to see a mountain lion, but you're allowed to just shoot it dead out of your car if you see a mountain lion.
Imagine that.
And it's like, how many mountain lions do we have? I mean, over a bit of a potential, 8 sheep might get killed in a year or something. And so, these laws of protecting some of these species, because we would like to, I think, have some wild America. Then we don't have to even go to it. Although Leopold never went to Alaska, and he wrote, I don't need to go to the Arctic to know I want to save places like that. I don't have to. It's not about me going there. We just want to make sure we don't over-industrialize to the point where there's nothing left. And I've been down to Haiti not long ago on assignment for Vanity Fair. You want to see what deforestation does. If you think trees are about green or tree hugging, trees keep the world going. Any place that's prosperous in the world is very smart. Has trees and forestry programs, because otherwise you don't have proper water, and you don't have it becomes a series of problems if you're not keeping your forest intact.
Other questions for our guest, Ms. Richards, and then in front, and then over here.
In any of your books, will you be dealing with conservation of the seas, or will it just be land?
Conservation
of the seas, as opposed to
I'm doing
land.
Seas quite a bit. I'm writing right now about the Monterey National Marine Sanctuary. And this incredible campaign that took place to save the sea otters around Monterey, where Steinbeck had done Cannery Row, and Ed Ricketts, the biologist, and Steinbeck were part of that particular movement. I'm writing about how John F. Kennedy created a new category, national seashores, and Kennedy's first 3, which got it all started, was Cape Cod, and then South Padre Island, and Point Reyes out in California. And they're all 3 extremely important success stories. They then plug in with Cape Hatteras, and we're starting to save parts of our coastline. So I'm writing about marine issues a lot, and I'm going to be writing a lot about South Padre Island and the sea turtles and the campaign and to preserve Texas coastline. We're lucky we've got some of that still, and it's usually citizens groups that are the protectors of it.
Ma'am.
You spoke briefly about John McCain's, Lisa Murkowski's, and Lamar Alexander's efforts towards conservation. I was wondering about our U.S. senators, Texas's U.S. senators. What are their efforts towards conservation, if any, current and former?
This is a softball pitch. Yeah.
The problem is with that complicates things. A lot of ranchers in a state like Texas are excellent conservationists. I have no doubt that personally, Sarah Palin is a personal steward. But they don't see, they believe their example is going to be the same as a huge company. And so there's many Republicans that maybe are personally take care of their land very well, but they don't want to share that conservation ethos. Kay Bailey Hutchinson used to be a big promoter of the big thicket. But people are running, both of these senators are afraid to do anything that's pro-federal government right now. So to say, let's enlarge Big Bend National Park, the Christmas Mountains, add it to it. No, that'll make it look like I love the feds. At Waco, Texas, there are these incredible dinosaur bones, woolly mammoth bones in Waco, which should be a national monument. All of the paperwork's been done, but the two senators are afraid to say it because in this state's climate, they're going to be seen as loving the U.S. government somehow. So we don't have a lot of courage coming out of our two senators in Texas when it comes to conservation. They don't get very high marks. I think Kay Bailey Hutchinson has it in her, but she's been burned a few times on pushing for conservation, and so she may change coming up right now. But it's not been very. They're on the very bottom of the senators in the country that promote it.
Here in the front, and then we'll. We have an actual expert in the audience on this subject who we will ask questions of in a second. Yes.
Throughout the course of writing and researching thus far, what has been the most striking, unusual, or unexpected experience that you've had with these two volumes?
Well, a lot of it, that one person that I wish you would all learn more about, because he's been maligned in history because he had 4 wives. But it's Justice William O. Douglas. William O. Douglas in the Supreme Court, what Douglas did, he would do walks to save things, just and he started it in the 1940s and 50s, so he almost single-handedly led these walks to stop the destruction of the C&O Canal. So when you go to Washington, you have that saved, and he did these walks along the Olympic Pacific coast to save Olympic National Forest, and he would do these. He went to the Brooks Range at just the right time to say save the Arctic. William O. Douglas is a gigantic figure in environmental and conservation history, and his books he's been laughed at, but everything that he wrote on wilderness and environment and on the need for alternative fuels and things in the 1950s and 60s. You read it, and it could have been written today. He was that prescient. He was a man far ahead of his time on understanding the issues of the planet, and he was a genius, and he was a genius Supreme Court justice. And his central argument after the Santa Barbara spill is that animals and fish have rights, and he cited did a hearing. He was the only one in the Supreme Court to do it, of Sierra Club versus the Mineral King, it was called. But Disney wanted to build a huge resort connected to Sequoia National Park, which would have created all these new roads and destroyed this whole area. And Douglas argued, which is so far-fetched now, but it's the key to environmental law, that places have rights, that nobody has the right here to take the river at Big Bend National Park and pollute the Rio Grande from us. We have a right to have that clean river. And it's this right that you have, like having oxygen. And that if you take your kids every year to go see the sandhill cranes, you have a right to experience the sandhill cranes over a over a certain number of generations. A company downriver, upriver can't take that right away from you. It's cutting edge environmental philosophy stuff, and he was doing it in the 1940s. Beyond that, there's nothing quite like the Aleutians. It makes Alaska is wilderness on steroids, and the Aleutian chain, lots of it hasn't been touched. And when you see those great bird flocks up there, and you feel you feel almost like the beginning of the world at some of those places up in Alaska, or in the further north you go with the northern lights, and you recognize how important the North Pole is, how important both of the Arctic and Antarctic was. And Dwight Eisenhower, Ike, he signed to demilitarize Antarctica. That's why there's not industrialization in Antarctica. And he went and saved the Arctic refuge for us in Alaska. He had a lot of worries about signing that using executive, but Eisenhower was, once educated, recognized, why would we want to destroy our poles? I mean, let's save them for humanity. And so this is not a tree hugger movement or something. These are like serious president like Dwight Eisenhower used to care about these things, but it's somehow it's become seen, if you like to, birds and fish and clean water and clean air, somehow you're like a lefty tree hugger. It seems to me it just means you're a good American and you want to take care of your backyard and you want to see your beautiful landscape healthy.
Mr. Secretary, you know Bob Armstrong?
I noticed that you didn't mention the pebble mine, but there are a lot of us that are concerned about the effect of the pebble mine in Alaska, and I wondered if you could comment on that.
Yeah, Pebble Mine up by, I write in this book, incidentally, a lot about Lake Clark National Park, and I write a lot about Bristol Bay. And these some people that got involved with preserving all of that, one group from New York was the Campfire Club of America, which is, they almost sound, they're very antiquated today in some ways, but they did a lot of good work. And it's a ground zero environmental movement. The National Geographic, if any of you are interested in it more, have a very good article on it. But we're trying to preserve the great fishery of the Bristol Bay area, the great salmon runs, and really this amazing wilderness area around Bristol Bay over to Kachemak Bay, all the way to Kachemak Bay. And it's if you look on a map, I recognized myself, and I'm struggling with Hawaii right now. I thought I kind of knew about Alaska, but until you spend time there and really study it, you really don't. But the issue he's talking about is a seminal environmental showdown going on as we speak, and how it's going to end up is unclear right now.
Yeah. Let's maybe take, Lynn, about one more. Is that all right? Okay, about one more. Ma'am. Well, actually, I see you both have your hands up, so let's do two. You first in the front, and then we'll take the one in the back as the last one.
Sometimes I wonder who will be the conservationist of tomorrow, since kids seem so fixated with electronics and so forth. Have you seen any programs that are really successful in engaging kids with nature?
It's an excellent question. It's called nature deficiency disorder.
There's a name for everything, isn't there? Yeah.
And I think probably the most crucial question is, how do we get our young people into understanding, naming a type of tree and learning the difference between types of birds and fish and grasses, and somehow getting reconnected to stewardship of the land and what it means. Kids love animals and they like television. They like to sit on a sofa and watch movies of cartoon animals and all, but we need to do a lot more hands-on teaching. There are a couple of positive things. There are many programs that are good. I recently have dealt with one out of all places, Lawton, Oklahoma, where school teachers are trying to, we have Wichita Mountains up there, and they're having outdoor classrooms and doing exciting things. There's a urban wilderness movement like Cory Booker in Newark, but of getting inner city kids to plant trees and go outdoors and kind of start preserving wilderness areas like we do here in Austin. So some air patches like the Wild Basin here, Zilker Park, and all. So you don't just burn out cities. Even Houston is trying to do that now, and there's some efforts to create a new national recreation area connecting Galveston and some of the bayous and waterways. So I would say 1964 was the Wilderness Act, which Lyndon Johnson signed. I think for the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, we need to get something out of Interior that's more about urban wilderness and how to bring minority kids, city people into an engagement into wild America, to species, to forestry, etc. But it's a challenge, and you're right, it's a problem.
Ma'am.
As a practicality, it's a practical question about you as a writer went up and moved your family to Homer, Alaska to do this research. How long did you need to stay in Alaska to feel like he did enough research? And what was it like for your?
Well, I've been going up to Alaska quite a bit to do research for this book and the previous one, but we rented a place in front of a place called Jars of Clay in Homer, which it's a pottery store, and we spent the summer there. We spent 3 months, and I just wanted my kids to experience, but also I picked Homer. It's a good place to be in the summer. It's a wonderful community, and I highly recommend it. But U.S. Fish and Wildlife has the Alaska National Maritime offices there. So I had a library of wild Alaska books, pamphlets, papers, and things. So it was a choice. I could have been in Anchorage, maybe Juneau or Homer, but I needed to have access to some of these materials that you can't really get here in Texas. And in addition, I was writing a profile for the book of a man who lived in Homer called Sea Otter Jones, who after World War II, we were dropping atomic bombs on the Aleutians, so they became a testing site. And in fact, Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, had Operation Chariot, and right where the Arctic we're talking about, the U.S. government was an inch away from dropping an atomic bomb on the Arctic to create an oil port up there. And it was Native Americans that started protesting, and then biologists and things from University of Alaska Fairbanks. But it was this close to having an atomic bomb just dropped on the Arctic. The Aleutians in the Arctic weren't considered they were considered far-flung wastelands. This group of people that I'm writing about knew better, and one of them worked for the government named Sea Otter Jones, and it broke his heart when he had to witness an atomic detonation. But he worked very hard to try to protect the Aleutian chain. And some of those hardy biologists do better than intellectuals do on convincing people at town hall meetings and stuff. And he's one of those people that can outsail, outrow, outfish, he's a type of outdoors person, and he would go to the town hall meetings in Homer, and we don't want nuclear fallout for our kids. And so it takes a lot of grassroots
Sea Otter
people.
was his nickname?
They called him Sea Otter Jones. He had pet otters.
I wonder if it was C. Otter Jones. Probably too much of a coincidence to imagine.
Well, he was an odd man. He was a very rough and ready guy who would listen to classical music all day long, and then got into saving all of these species up there. But the otters, he started putting scuba suits on and went into very cold waters and started finding why the otter populations were dying from chemicals and things. It's a longer story, but it's in the book. If you like sea otters, you get plenty of it.
So again, the Book People is next week.
Yes.
And
it'll be next Saturday evening. I'll be at Book People.
Okay. Well, spend your time there.
7 o'clock.
Spend your money there, and congratulate once again Doug Brinkley on his success. Thanks for being here.